Good evening, everyone. Welcome to SNFL. My name is Ann Bell. I'm the Managing Librarian of Programs and Outreach here. And I would like to welcome you to our talk tonight about the glowing hours. I also want to remind you before we get started that if you don't have a library card already, you can get one in this building at any info desk. They will help you out. And I also want to encourage you, if you enjoy tonight's events and want to come to more talks, we have concerts and poetry readings and all kinds of things. You can check out our website, nypl.org, and check our events page. And we would love to have you back. But let me introduce tonight's speakers. We have our author, Leila Siddiqui. She was born in Chicago, raised in Texas, and now lives here in New York with her husband, who's over here. When she's not writing, she spends her time worshiping her 3 very floofy cats, experimenting with vegan recipes from Instagram, and crocheting fun new projects. Her debut YA novel, House of Glass Hearts, was published in 2021. And Leila is going to be in a conversation with Shelly Romero, who is a Honduran-American associate agent at Azantian Literary Agency. She began her publishing career at Scholastic and was a freelance editor prior to agenting. Outside of work, she loves watching movies and immediately logging them on her Letterboxd, playing board games, usually with a horror spin, and attending concerts whenever she can. Born and raised in Miami, Florida, she also lives here in New York City. So let's welcome them for a lovely conversation. Welcome, Leila and Shelly.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out in the weather. I think this weather is like moody though, so it's like perfect for.
It's perfect because it rains pretty much the whole time in this book. So there you go.
And driving them mad.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start first. Can you give the crowd who hasn't read the book maybe a little bit of a blurb of what the book's about?
Yeah. So basically, the book is about the summer that Mary Shelley spent with Lord Byron and Percy Shelley and I'm like blanking right now. And her half sister her stepsister and Claire Claremont, and it inspired her to write Frankenstein. Basically, it was the year without a summer. This volcano erupted in Indonesia. It lowered global temperatures so that when they went on vacation in Geneva, it just rained all the time. And so this collection of poets and romantics were basically stuck indoors, and they told ghost stories to while away the time. And so the lore goes that Mary Shelley had a nightmare, and it inspired her to write Frankenstein. What I did was basically made it so that the villa is haunted, and that's what inspires her to write Frankenstein. But it's told from the point of view of her Indian maid, who is on the cover.
Yes. So we're definitely going to get to the villa and to Mehr, who is the main character. But first, I want to talk to you because you did a lot of research. So you thank the Fortimer collection of Shelley and his circle here at the New York Public Library. Can you explain your process for researching this novel and accessing this incredible collection?
Yes. And I hope I'm saying it correctly, but the Fortimer collection of Shelley and his circle is actually across the street at the other branch. I always say the one with the lions. And there's a lot of research I needed to do, and a lot of these books were out of print and very hard to get. So I was very lucky that when I went online to do my research, the New York Public Library had so many of these books that are out of print. The process was basically checking them out online, but I had to read them on site. So I would, pick a day I'm off from work or a weekend, and I'd go in and I'd find a comfy seat in the huge reading rooms. I would check out the books on site, and then I'd stay there and read them for hours and gather my research that way. But it was such an incredible, valuable resource for me.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the pieces that you accessed?
Yeah. John Polidori, who is not very well known, he figures prominently in this novel. He traveled with them over the summer. He was Lord Byron's personal physician, and and once again, part of the lore of this summer that they spent together was that Lord Byron said, "Let's all write a ghost story." And so Mary Shelley, started working on Frankenstein, and John Polidori wrote a novella called The Vampire. This ended up later on inspiring Bram Stoker's Dracula. Yeah. It predates that. And so one of the pieces they had was his journal during that time. Yeah. And what was so helpful was that he actually has a little sketch of what their bedrooms look like. And I needed that because I don't know what this villa's bedrooms look like. Yeah. So that was really great. And then I read Claire Claremont's collection of her, bit of her memoir and like some of her letters. So I got an idea of what kind of character she was. Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley shared travel journal. So yeah, so much of these sort of firsthand accounts of how these people spoke and how they wrote and what their personalities were.
Yeah, I really love that because I feel like you mentioned John Polidori is not really mentioned much. And even I believe Byron was attributed as the writer for The Vampire. So a little bit of that stolen valor. And then finally they gave him that recognition.
Yeah.
So I think, following on that, can you explain a little bit maybe to some of the writers who might be in the audience how they can also go about like accessing the library, because it's not only this collection, there's so many other collections that the library has in order to do their own research for their own novel.
Absolutely. I think that the New York Public Library is, like I said, such a valuable resource, and always start there. Always start at your local library. You'll never know what they have. And I feel so incredibly lucky to have a library card to be able to access this wealth of information and research. And I think, if you're a writer and you're writing historical fiction or historical fiction horror like me, and you don't know where to start with your library, search for it online. Don't be discouraged if it says it's not at your local branch. You will be able to find a copy. I remember over the pandemic, I was able to get photocopied parts of books, which was so also valuable. So the library is always here for you, and whenever you need it. So definitely do not be discouraged. All the resources are here.
Thank you. I really love that. The fact that we have so much access that we can get to. So let's talk about Mehr, who is on the cover. She is our protagonist. So we're introduced to her, and we're gonna try not to do some spoilers because
I'm gonna try really hard.
We're gonna try really hard.
Yeah.
But this is really at the beginning. This is the prologue. It is 42 years before the event, after the events of the novel. In the prologue, she is asked by Jane Shelley, who's Mary Shelley's daughter-in-law, as to whether she's the inspiration for Sapphy in Frankenstein. So can you talk a little bit about Sapphy? Your idea for this novel, you mentioned a little bit when you were giving the blurb, and then how this all led to Meher's creation.
Yeah. So raise your hand if you read Frankenstein in the last 5 years. Don't lie. Okay. The movie doesn't count because it's a little bit different. And Sapphy's not in the movie at all.
No, she's not in the movie at all.
Okay. So I reread Frankenstein a couple years ago. Within the last 5 years, I'll raise my hand as well. And I remember I'd already read it so many times. One of those books you just come back to, especially when the weather is like this. And I remember reading and really honing in on the character of Sapphy. And she's this Turkish character who, while the Frankenstein's monster is basically out in the wilderness on his own, he's been banished by Victor. Mm-hmm. And he kind of lives in his hovel, and he's spying on this family, the de Lacys, and he gets really taken by these people because he's searching for family. And so he basically is able to follow what's been going on with them, and this beautiful, mysterious, foreign and exotic, and I want to, make an emphasis on that, foreign and exotic character enters their lives. She's romantically involved with the son in this family. And I just thought, where did Mary Shelley come up with this character? Because she isn't English woman, and she's very young. And there was this interest in other parts of the world. Lord Byron had spent time in Turkey. He speaks of it very much in his letters. He speaks about it in the book. But just this choice that she made, that she has this, Turkish character, and she describes her very fully. And so I was so inspired by what inspired her to come up with this character, who's basically becomes this object of fascination and infatuation, not just for Frankenstein's creation, but for the de Lacys.
And she's not just like, oh, it's like a blurb or two a page. It is about, like, I looked it up in my book, like about 3 full chapters of mentioning her back and forth. Like, she is this very minor character. Like you mentioned, she's foreign, she's exotic. To me, I feel like Safi is very much, othered, of course, in Frankenstein, but it's also that reflection of the creature who, he himself is othered.
Yeah.
And whatnot. So.
Yeah. And I think that there's that parallel between, Safi just gets to walk up in here and now she has a whole family. She has a de Lacys, right? And Frankenstein's creation is, has a father, right? Has a creator, and is banished, and could have had this family, the Frankensteins, and is banished. And in some way, my main character is also looking for family. And so there's those parallels between Frankenstein's creation and my main character, where they're going to be on the outside looking in at these family units, wanting what they have.
And I think for me, one of the interesting parts was that it wasn't really, she's of course being othered just by the nature of, being a brown woman. She's an Indian woman. But also she's the one who others Shelly and Co. They are so weird to her. They are chaotic. And she's just like, why am I here? So I think with that, I'm going to ask you about Mehr and Mary's characterizations, because Mary Shelley, she's been depicted a few times in media. I feel like there's a couple of big movies, which is like Gothic, the Mary Shelley movie with Elle Fanning, and then my favorite, which is 1935, Bride of Frankenstein. That one is Elsa Lanchester playing both Mary and the bride. So, but we in this book, of course, we experience the story via Mehr. I think she's very complex. She's a young woman who is of Indian nobility, and then forced by circumstances into becoming a housemaid, like I mentioned, of this very chaotic white English couple, and then of course later on their friends. So can you talk a little bit about some of the choices you made depicting both this historical figure who we all know as like the godmother of Gothic, as well as like this fictional character?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much personal in there, where you want to you grow up in a country, your parents are immigrants, you're an American, but you're really not. And there's so much of that sense of wanting to belong and wanting to be with these other people. And there's times, there's that push and pull with Mehr, with my main character, because I'll go into her backstory without spoilers, because this is like the first third of the book. Yeah. But basically her father was this white British merchant. He went to India to find his fortune. This is just at the dawn of colonialism, and before the British came and colonized. And so at that time, it was just lots of men coming over to seek fortune. What they were doing, and this has been documented in other books, really great books, one by William Dalrymple called The White Mughals. And what they were doing was they were just finding their way into these noble families and marrying these like literal children. They were very young teen children that they were marrying and having children with. Once they found their fortune, they went back to England and left them. Sometimes they took their children with them. Back then, children were considered property of the father. And so they would have children, biracial children, take them back with them, leave the rest of the family, leave the wives they had, and just move on. And so that's kind of Meher's backstory, is that her father was a merchant. He comes over, you know, he marries her mother. He has her and her brother, but he takes her brother back to, you know, raise in England as a gentleman. She's left behind. So when her mother passes away, she is basically uprooted and told by her extended family, you need to leave, you need to go to England, find your brother because he has an inheritance now. She Islamically it does not get much, is not meant to get much. And so it's all her brother. So now she's like, has to leave her life of comfort to go and do this. And so, you know, there's a lot of historical context to that as well. And so there are points where Mehr is looking at these people and she's thinking, had my father taken me too, raised me in England, these would be my people. I wouldn't be their maid. I would be on holiday with them, you know? And she even thinks my brother could be these people. He could be their contemporaries. He could be their friends.
Yeah. And I think I really love like basically like the little bit of that note that you have where her brother is called James, but he has his real name, which is Sikander.
Yeah.
And it's very just, you know, I love that purpose of like showing that assimilation and the fact that he just, of course, takes the man to become a gentleman. I want to definitely talk about some of my favorite elements of the Gothic that you included in this book. So the Gothic really loves playing with relationship dynamics, which can be a little weird. We've seen this done in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Mia Goth plays both Victor's mom and Elizabeth, who's his love interest. And then also she is, you know, both motherly and bride to the creature. So you also play with these dynamics with Mehr and Mary, and there's this bit of push and pull with Mehr not really caring / wanting to care, but still kind of caring, being curious. And then, of course, they're kind of like these mirrors, and there might be a little bit something else. Again, I don't want to spoil it, even though I wish we could talk about it. I know.
I mean, there is a lot of importance placed on the mother character, right?
Yeah.
Mehr is basically, not a spoiler, I promise, haunted by, you know, her mother, in the sense that what her mother went through or who she was. She has a lot of resentment towards her mother. She feels like her mother is the reason her father left. She has a lot to learn. And Mary Shelley is also very preoccupied with her mother. She's in this villa. They did bring a baby into this villa, so she has her child. Her own mother died very soon after Mary Shelley was born. And so both of them have this preoccupation with motherhood and their relationships with their mother, where Mehr resents her mother for who she was, and Mary idolizes her mother for who she was. So there is a little bit of that. They do really mirror each other. I mean, there's no coincidence that it's Mary and Mehr. Her full name is Mehrunissa, but she goes by Mehr in this. That's her version of the Sikander and the James, right? Like what's more palatable to a European audience in front of her. And so, there is this sort of mirror between them. And there's ways that they both are very preoccupied by their mothers, but also the men in their lives.
Yes.
Right? Because Mehr is uprooted because of her brother, who she hasn't seen in years. Now she has to basically deliver him this inheritance letter. And Mary is also uprooted from her comfort by Percy Shelley, who basically is saying, dude, Lord Byron wants to hang out with us this summer. We know who he is. He was very famous during his time. I mean, he was viral before viral existed. Yes. He was like a rock star. And he had a great reputation that preceded him, but also he had one of the most preeminent publishers in England, John Murray. So Percy's basically like, let's go. Well, we're going to go do this. We're going to spend the summer with him because this could be really big for us. I do think that there was some motivation there for sure. But both of them, you know, their lives of comfort are disrupted by the men in their lives.
Yeah. And I think it even shows, and of course this is not quite a spoiler because it's historical, but, you know, Claire Claremont and Lord Byron, who also had an affair, and they're also being potentially probably verified an affair that she had with Percy. there's all of that connection, of course, with the patriarchy and the fact that like there's just kind of so obsessed when these women themselves are also just brilliant, and yet, you know, they're just like, but my man, unfortunately.
These men.
These men. So another aspect.
I can hear my husband giggling, like the loudest.
Yeah.
Like, is there fear giggle? I don't know.
So another aspect of the Gothic that I wanted to talk about is setting, and we talked a little bit about the villa. This is, I think, one of my favorite elements of the Gothic. I feel like it really just can add a lot to that atmosphere. So can you talk about Villa Diodati, how you crafted it? You know, it's very haunting and very beautiful, and a real place that still exists today.
It does, yeah.
Because I think we talked about this when we went out. To me, it reminded me a little bit of the House of Leaves house, where it feels kind of confusing, and there's all these kind of different entry points, and that adds a lot to what Mehr goes through.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I want to say I kind of did that on purpose, where you don't understand the layout. Maybe I didn't fully understand the layout. I think unconsciously, too, there is that element of this person who is a fish out of water, and is in this environment and country and amongst people that she is not comfortable with, or isn't very, you know, hasn't been exposed to. And so there's so much navigating around the villa, and there's so much navigating for my main character around these people, their moods, their temperaments. And so, you know, I want to say, like, there's some of that was on purpose, where you don't really fully understand the layout. Some of it was unconscious as well, because every which way she turns, there's a new confusing thing she has to learn, or new confusing, you know, mood that a person is in. The villa, like Shelly said, really does still exist. It's still there. There is on the cover, and now I think it's converted into apartments. I think you can go inside. Yeah. But I didn't have a ton of research of what the inside looked like. Like I said, I read these, you know, journals and firsthand accounts, and no one said, okay, so this is where the kitchen was, and this is where, you know, this is how the rooms were, except for Polidori, who literally sketched out what the rooms look like. I was so grateful for him. But yeah, I kind of just went rogue. I kind of just, you know, just went for it and described it in the best way as I could, but also didn't want to be that writer that really focuses on you know, this is exactly where each room is. You know, I want the reader to use their imagination and kind of get lost in that maze as well.
No, I think you did really well in that, because I felt like, oh God, like a little stressed when I was reading. And I was reading this late at night with like a book light. And I'm just like, yeah, exactly. Tonight, you know, the rain is also perfect. But, you know, just kind of how, you know, Mehr kind of goes around, and it feels very much like that typical like haunted house. Like, are the things that I'm hearing just an old house settling, or is it something else? You know, is the shadow moving? It was all just done really well.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask about, you know, this is your first adult novel. You had your debut novel was a speculative contemporary YA, House of Glass Hearts. And I wanted to ask, like, how did this process of writing it differ when going from, you know, this YA to an adult Gothic supernatural?
When I wrote my first novel, I feel like I wrote that for younger readers who don't get exposed to history beyond Western history. You know, growing up in Texas in high school, I remember so much of my own, you know, where my family's originated, that history felt like such a footnote. And there's such a, you know, I always kind of jokingly say, I know every single one of Henry VIII's wives and how they died. And I can tell you, like, this one died this way, this one died that way. But I can walk up to a person outside and say, quick, name me a Mughal emperor, and go. And they're just like, I don't know. Yeah. You know, okay, but like, how did Anne Boleyn die and why? It's like, oh, that story I know, you know? And so it's just, I felt like there's so much of my ancestral history that, you know, had such an impact on the world. And we just don't get to see it or hear it. And it does get erased from media. I made this joke. I'm not gonna go make a joke again about this, but my husband and I went to go watch Dunkirk, and I remember being like, all right, settling in, World War II, and there was 2 million Indian soldiers fought in World War II on behalf of their colonizer against a great evil. I mean, just think about that tension, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, settling in, all right, we're gonna see Indian soldiers. Not a one. None on that beach. None were evacuated in this movie. And I was so frustrated that I couldn't really get into the art of the movie. I couldn't
just Harry Styles.
Yeah. Just Harry Styles, who was in that movie. I don't even know, because I was looking for the Indian soldiers.
Yes.
And but I'm glad that you got something out of Dunkirk.
No, oh God, no. For me, it was Cillian Murphy.
It was Cillian Murphy. Wait, he was in that movie?
Yes.
Was he an Indian soldier? No, right?
No,
that's why I don't know.
Exactly.
So basically, in Cillian Murphy, I got to go back and watch it now, and not in a frustrated way, but yeah, it's so distracting for me as a person to watch these historical things and be like, where are my people? Where are we? We were there. I know we were there. Historically, we were there. And so, that frustration caused me to want to write this book. And the book is basically about India's part in World War II, that push and pull, once again, fighting on behalf of your colonizer against this great evil, and just sort of their place in that. And then at the same time, what happened a couple of years after World War II, which was partition, which was, this great splitting between Muslims and Hindus that created India and Pakistan, which issues still to this day reverberate. Yeah. And so much of that was because of British colonization. And so I feel like I was writing that book for the younger me, because I didn't have a book like that when I was 15, 16, 17. And I feel like as the generations go on, my nieces and nephews know even less, because they don't watch Bollywood movies, but I do. All right, I've seen the ones that have partition, but the next generations are like, we're just gonna not watch that stuff. Like that's like older person stuff. And so that book really is for younger readers to really show that history that gets buried, our history that gets buried. Writing this, I wrote this for me because I've often loved this story, this origin story of how Mary Shelley was inspired to write Frankenstein. I'm also a horror girly. I love horror. And so I wanted to put all these people in this villa and see what they did, see how they interacted, just see how they pissed each other off, and how much chemistry they also had too. There's a lot of chemistry in this too. And that was different. This was a book I was writing for myself.
I really love it because you really do get that feeling. Like, I think when you're a horror person and you are I think everyone, has like that phase of like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with like Mary Shelley and co, and like want to learn everything about Percy Shelley and Lord Byron. It really shows that love of, the Gothic and who those people were, like you mentioned. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. You work in publishing as well. To being an author, so you're more intimate with the publishing process by this virtue than an author who isn't. But was there anything that surprised you during this process with this sophomore novel?
I think what surprised me was that as a publishing professional, I work in marketing and I help other authors basically market their books. And I do a lot of the work. I think what surprised me was how much I could do on my own, and that I could kind of just go and do. And I don't want to say go rogue, because I always let my team know what was on my mind, what I was thinking of doing. But I realized that, where I love working with my authors, and I love being that person for them. And I'm just gonna say, I love coddling them. I love taking care of them. And it's almost like, no, I'll do this outreach for you. I'll handle it. I thought, well, I could just do it and give them a break, because they're busy. They have other books too they're working on. I know, because I do the same work. And so what surprised me was how much I could just go out in the world and do and talk to my own contacts instead of, you know, waiting for my team to do that on my behalf. I thought, well, I'm a brand now, you know, as an author, you're a brand. So you can kind of, oh, thanks. That was weird. Thank you. That's my twin sister. So I do have one fan here. But I just thought, I have an identity as an author now. This is so cool. I can actually go and talk to people and say, I am an author of a book. And so that still hits me like a ton of bricks. It doesn't get old. It's still kind of, you know, it's such a remarkable thing to be able to say that. And so I think that was kind of what was different, was I can kind of do some of the stuff I do for my authors, but I can do it for myself, and that's okay. And it makes me feel like I've been able to encourage my authors, hey, if you have contacts, go for it, and then just loop me in, because I also don't want to stop them from doing their own outreach.
I just want to say for like the non-publishing or book people in the audience that it really takes a village to publish a book. Like, publishing a book feels like nothing short of a miracle, especially nowadays. So like, I truly love that, like, you through this process, you were like, I can also help out my own authors and show them like how they can do this themselves, because authors don't get a sheet or something, or like here's how to be an author. You know, you kind of have to learn it, and you don't know what you don't know until you have to figure it out. Yeah, and it's been really nice to be able to, you know, instead of speak to them as this, you know, stodgy, I work in business, I work in publishing, I'm a business person, you know, or like we do business stuff, to be able to relate to them as an author, where, you know, we have this book coming out, and looking at it as an author, I was thinking, well, we gotta do all these great things for this book, and sometimes in publishing, we work on a lot of books, like we come across a lot of books, and you're just like working, but able to step back and think how they feel as an author. How can we make them feel comfortable, secure? Because you're right, the average author comes in, they don't know what's going on. You know, I had that leg up because I work in the industry, but yeah, to just take a step back and think, are we making sure their questions are answered? And this is probably a bit boring, but I have this policy where I don't want to go more than 24 hours without responding to someone. So if I don't have an answer, I'll say, I don't have an answer, but I'll get back to you. But I just don't want to leave people in the lurch like that. And I just want them to know that we're here. We're just not in front of you, but we're here for you. I always tell authors, like, it doesn't hurt to ask. Like, if you want something, or like you have a question about like something, like, it absolutely doesn't hurt to like ask, because you never know. The answer could be yes, which is great, or the answer could be like, maybe we can work with this, or you know, flat out no. But again, if you don't take that leap, it's you know, you don't know. So I have like a question or two left. Another pivot. So when we went out to drinks to talk about like this event and like just hang out, I'm trying not to spoil this. There's a scene that I was like, in the book, that I was like, oh, this kind of reminds me of like this one scene in like Hannibal, the TV show, which I love. If you know, you know. And you actually mentioned, it was Sense8 that inspired it. So without maybe spoiling, I want to ask, like, what are there other maybe media inspirations like that for the glowing hours? Yeah, the only way I'll spoil it is say that there is a spicy scene. Yes, there is a spicy scene. I'm very proud of it. I remember my editor was like, this is too short, make it longer. And I was like, do you know what? I will, pun intended, do whatever you want me to do with this scene. So yes, I wasn't, as someone who consumes a lot of horror media and, you know, mostly films, and then, you know, obviously horror TV and other horror books too, I'm constantly like a sponge, just inspired. So much of the inspiration is what it makes me feel like, because it's such a visceral feeling when you're watching a scary movie. You're closing your eyes, like, you know, you're waiting for the jump scare, you're waiting for something to happen, and then you have that nice, calm resolution. Usually, in most, I feel, horror movies, you have a resolution. And so a lot of the feeling kind of goes into it. But I would say the one
film and person that has inspired me the most is Guillermo del Toro. I just
Absolutely,
right,
yeah.
and then he just comes out and makes Frankenstein, and I just think we are connected. I think he's watching it, and I hope he is.
That's how I feel. I'm like platonic soulmate, maybe. Like,
I think that
call me.
I think that I think that he and I have hive mind.
Yes.
I think we are plugged into the same machine in the Matrix.
I love this.
I'm gonna keep going. I could keep talking about him and me.
No, but I think like, and that brings up like the really interesting part of like why I loved Frankenstein and why I like loved reading this book, right? Is that it's coming from that different perspective.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said Frankenstein was coming from a very Mexican Catholic point of view. And it also still has those like kind of fairy tale elements that he loves to put in his movies.
Yeah.
And of course you did something similar with bringing your own life and your own into this.
And I think that what, Guillermo, if you're watching, what inspires me about you is Pan's Labyrinth just left such a mark on me. I think when I watched it, it was, for me, the first time I'd seen anything like it ever. And I think, like you said, there's like those dark fairy tale elements, but just the way he mingles history and horror and the horror of history. And, it really inspired me to do that with my writing, which is what I do, which is combining history and horror, but also that human story inside of it. And what is actually going on in the midst of all of that. And it's just to tell a story in that way, I found so inspiring. And so I do feel like Pan's Labyrinth just has left such a mark on me that I always feel like I'm always going back to that. It's really influenced how I write.
And it's also, I think, you see it across the board in his stories. And this is something that I liked about Mehr, is that like the characters are not perfect, right? Like they're nuanced, they're messy. And that's something that I liked about Mehr, which some people could be like, oh, she's so snobby. And I'm like, yeah, you would be too if you were born into nobility.
But also, why not,
yeah,
right?
And
because,
why not? Like, we can be snobby, like,
right.
Like,
we're not always going to be meek and oppressed.
Yeah,
like we might be, but we're going to also be really bothered by it and irritated and inconvenienced by being oppressed.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, that's an element that I really liked. And I think
Are we at time?
I think we're almost to time. I'm gonna ask one quick question that I didn't put in my notes that I sent to you, which is, what's next?
What can I talk about? I definitely have 2 completed books, but I don't know how much how much I can talk about them. But I will say, similarly historical horror with that human story inside of it, and a unique way to tell history through this medium, which is horror. But I don't know if I should say too much, but let's just say I have 2 completed books and one I'm probably going to start this summer.
All right, amazing.
That I hintedly told you earlier.
Yeah,
but
I know you told me a
about.
little bit, but I probably can't say anything.
Yeah,
so.
it's just that the one I'm going to write in the summer, the main character is going to be Dev Patel.
Yes.
I'm going to name him David Patel.
I'm very excited about this.
And that's all I told you, and you're really excited.
And I was
that's
like,
great.
I'm down. Like, no worries. I'm say less.
Yeah. He's going to be my muse for the next one.
Yes. But, I had to ask that, of course, even though this just came out. And they are selling the book here tonight, so I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But I think we'll do the Q&A, so please have some questions ready.
There's a microphone.
There's microphones around, so if you have one, raise your hand, and they'll bring them to you. Don't be shy.
Hi. It's so wonderful hearing about how you did your research over at the library, and I'm really curious, what were some of the most surprising things you learned from the journals and from the kind of working dynamics of Mary Shelley and some of her artistic, creative muses and partners in all of this?
Okay, are you ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
So, great. So, I love this question because while it was so great to have these firsthand accounts of these people and sort of like I said, how they spoke, how they related to one another, how they talked about the world around them, what I found so interesting was that none of these firsthand accounts actually talked about that summer. So in Polidori's journal, while it was great to get a sketch of what the rooms look like, thanks Polidori, and all the balls and soirees he went to in Geneva, he just skips over that summer. It's suddenly autumn, and it's like, okay, now we're leaving Geneva. And I thought, well, wait, what happened? And it was the same with Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley's shared travel journal. They, talked about getting there, and Mary even fondly refers to Lord Byron as Albie, his initials LB, and sort of, what their home looked like before, like they had a little chalet, what it looked like before they moved into the big house with Byron, and then they all just shacked up together. Then it moves on to September. Okay, now we're leaving. And I thought, wait, hold on. Flipping through pages, did I miss something? And back then there was this horrible practice, the wonderful practice of keeping journals. I think that's great. There's so many firsthand accounts from historical periods that are just all these journals people longhand wrote. But Mary Shelley's daughter-in-law, the wife of her only surviving son, was getting all her papers together. She just loved her mother-in-law, was so devoted to her. And apparently she was going through their journal and found some stuff she didn't like, felt like it might affect her legacy, tore it up and threw it in the fireplace. And the other thing was that Lord Byron wrote a memoir, and when he passed away, in his will, it was to go to his publisher, John Murray. Well, John Murray got the copy. He read through it, was so disturbed by what he saw, he threw it in the fireplace, because that's what they did. So those are very surprising things, because something went down that summer. And nobody wanted the rest of the world to see. And there are, secondhand, third-hand accounts. And, in Mary Shelley's, in the introduction to Frankenstein, she talks about, we stayed up all night telling ghost stories, and this inspired me. But what really happened? And so that really, that was surprising to me, but it also gave me a lot of freedom to write whatever I wanted and create the events and the, scenes between them.
You kind of mentioned this earlier about like Meher's characterization. One thing I really loved was seeing in Brown Woman not take the rage bait.
There's so much rage baiting in
yeah,
this. Yeah.
I was rage baited. But I just wanted to ask how you came up with that character. Did Mehr kind of just come to you and you were like, oh, she's gonna be snappy, bossy, and in a good way, and petty? Or was it something you discovered along the writing process that you wanted to write this character in this way?
Mehr came to me because, like I said, I like looking at historical events and then just putting my people in there. And she's my people. But also, I wanted to be there. I wanted to spend a summer with Lord Byron and Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley. I wish I was invited, And so she's kind of my proxy, because I would have, if I had a time machine, I would totally go to Geneva and just wait around, hang around and wait for them, and ask them if they want to hang out with me. And so, she was kind of born out of that. I was always so fascinated and obsessed with the story of these romantics just locked up in this villa together. So she's kind of my proxy. But at the same time, when I was writing her, she wasn't as, strong-willed in my writing, I think, because I was putting parts of myself in there. How would I feel being in a room with Lord Byron? I mean, I would be tongue-tied, and so, or Mary Shelley, my goodness, obviously she was pre-Frankenstein, right? But she was just a captivating young woman. And so, if I was in the room with these people, I wouldn't know, what to do. And so my sister, who's one of my earliest readers, actually really pushed me to develop Mehr into this character. She was reading and saying, she's a noble woman. She would be like, why the hell am I doing your laundry? And also, your sheets are really crappy. I have way better stuff at home because I'm rich. And so,
which you do have that moment, and I just thought it was so funny, because when they get to Byron, to Villa Diodati, she's like, wow, these are nicer.
Yeah. Yeah. She's like, okay, fine. These are pretty nice. But that really gave me a jolt, because I thought, oh, okay, this is where I need to kind of draw a line between me and myself, and the way we put ourselves into our writing, and have this character who is, complicated and interesting, and oppressed, but like doesn't see it or understand it. And I love that. I loved portraying her that way.
Because it's not a story about assimilation either. She is just really trying to survive this haunted house and these people who are a little insane.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
Does anyone have a question? Another? No. In front.
No, you are not allowed.
First of all, thank you for the shout and giving me credit for your character. But, you know, having the privilege of having read some of your unpublished manuscripts, like I said, it's a privilege. I've noticed, you know, you have a common thread, you have a common theme. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's colonialism, and then even like in House of Glass Hearts, generational trauma that comes from colonialism. Do you feel like you've worked it out of your system, or do you feel like this is something where you're like, I want to keep exploring different ways to express this in my future work, or are you interested in maybe other thematic ideas?
No. So I don't know if I've worked it out of my system, because I think that there are so many angles and elements to being a colonized subject, which there is a term for that, and it is a generational thing where you might not be colonized in the moment, but you are a product of colonization. And so I am a colonial subject. And so, you know, I just think that there's no one easy way, right, to depict what that is and just how varying it can be. And I do think that the more I've researched in my writing, the more I've seen how varying these experiences are and how varying it can be to be able to explain it in different ways. And so my subsequent things I'm writing, they touch on it, but in different ways, where maybe the main character isn't a colonized subject, but they are affected by, and their opinions and their ideas are affected by it until, you know, they get to a point where they understand, you know, that this isn't right. And so, you know, my main characters don't need to be, you know, have the same demographic as me, but I do think that there's no one way to portray it. It's just, it's so vast, and I think something that people are still trying to understand.
I think it's also great because in this industry, you know, I think often when they see people of color, it's like, oh, we're a monolith and like we all represent one. But like you said, we have so many nuances and so many points of view. And even talking about the generational trauma, I mean, there's been, I think, studies that have come out that trauma literally will rewrite your DNA. Mm-hmm. And they have studied how it impacts you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's called epigenetics.
Yeah.
Because when I saw that, I was like, well, let's just take a look. But yeah, it is a generational thing, and it's going to take a while because we do still live in an environment that we are still touched by it, and you might not even know. But, you know, for example, it's like going out to eat, and I don't know how to use silverware because I grew up eating with my hands. That's what South Asian people do. We eat with their hands. I'm really more comfortable. I could eat soup with my hands if I could. And so there's like those little things, right, where it's, you know, where did we come up with this notion that it's good table manners to use cutlery, mm-hmm. right? Like, who said that? But we internalize it so that I go to a restaurant, I'm like, I wonder if someone can see me being awkward with a fork and knife because I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have time for maybe one more question.
Maybe someone not related to me. Just one question, one person.
Hi, Shelly's husband.
So not related to you.
Yeah,
great.
Related to you, yeah. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some relation there. I don't know. Hi, Shelly's husband.
Hi, a little softball for you. Seeing drawings in somebody's journal, has that made you want to start drawing rooms that you've been in your daily journal, if you have one?
I can't draw.
Oh. I
can't even draw stick figures. They don't look right. They look wrong. But it has made me feel like, I feel daunted by the idea, but it makes me feel like I should keep a journal because you never know. People really wrote back then, and we don't really do that anymore. I don't know if it's because of internet.
Yeah, like I mean, I have
you did it
mainly for work, but like like what do we lose when we are not keeping these stories down.
Absolutely. I'll keep longhand notes for work, like in meetings. I wouldn't type up my notes, but it did make me think. I am so lucky to be able to read the journals of people who are dead hundreds of years. No spoiler to what I'm working on, but the Mughal emperors kept journals, and I'm reading one of them, and it's just like he's talking about what he ate that day, and I love it because we just we don't really do that anymore, and so that, if anything, inspired me to just think about writing a journal. But then I think, is anyone going to care 300 or 500 years from now? Probably not. But I could talk about what I ate.
Yeah,
I could talk about it. No one's going to care.
Or we could just throw them into the fire as well.
I would write it and throw it into the fire.
Okay.
Yeah, I would do that.
Thank you very much, Shelly and Leila. Thank you so much for coming. Leila's going to be right outside signing her book, and we have books for sale, so stop by and say hi. And again, thank you for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.